Welcome to FOBtv,
the future of business.
I'm your host, Kevin Benedict.
And I'm Alexandra Whittington.
And we want to thank all of you for joining the program today. We're really excited to introduce and welcome back our guest, Mark Bramwell. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, Alexandra. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to join you.
So Mark is the CIO of the Saïd Business School. He's an associate fellow with the Green Templeton College, University of Oxford. Thank you again, Mark, for being here and returning to our program.
Oh, it's great. It's great to come back and share stories and update on what's happened over the past couple of years, Kevin.
Now, that doesn't look like University of Oxford in the background.
That's very astute of you. I'm living the glamorous executive life of being in a bedroom in Denver, Colorado.
All right.
Apologies for the background.
So what brings you to Denver today?
Oh, it's really exciting. We've been invited to attend the Instructor Con Executive Summit. So I'm really looking forward to the next 2 or 3 days in terms of networking with some of my colleagues and peers and friends in higher education and understanding what some of the trends are in relation to learning, digital learning, AI, and what the future might hold.
All right. Well, let's just jump into the interview today. You and I were together in 2020 on this program, and we were talking about all this like crazy stuff happening around us with COVID pandemic, just changing our life from all kinds of different directions, both our personal lives and our professional lives. So let me just jump in there and ask you now, here in 2023, really kind of post the biggest impact of COVID, in what ways has higher education in general been changed by the pandemic, Mark?
Well, I say it's incredible to reflect back on when we last spoke, Kevin and Alex, sort of 3 years ago, in terms of what's changed. And I think we'd all agree that the pace of change has been phenomenal, and nobody could have predicted that. I'm going to slightly contradict myself in that in many ways, higher education has transformed, and in many ways, it's still the same. So if I look at it through the lens of Saïd Business School, University of Oxford, a lot of the things that we thought that were going to change regarding the growth of online education, the impact on admission and enrollment numbers, we haven't really seen at the school. We're very fortunate, I guess, partly because of potentially the Oxford brand, that our application and enrollment numbers are as strong as they've always been. But what we're finding is the change to online and the student learner demands have changed. They've certainly demanded. The trends around modality and high flex and blended learning are still very much there, increasingly so. And the students are wanting to learn and grow their learning in different ways, by different media, by different channels, by different technologies at different times. And they want to ingest and they want to take that learning in a way that's personal to them. And I think that's the challenge that we now face in terms of how do we personalize that learning? How do we maintain that quality? How do we make sure that we are ensuring that learning experience is differentiated, personalized, equitable, and inclusive?
So, Mark, you are, we can almost look at this from 2 different ways. We can look at the University of Oxford, and we can look at higher education in general. Let's talk about the general part of it. What are you hearing about, if you would, the industry of higher education? Are you hearing things that, might be a little different from your school, but you're hearing that as kind of trends out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough out there. I'd start with, talking to some of my peers across UK and European higher education, and even some of my colleagues in the US and North America. It's very clear that it's a challenging and increasingly competitive landscape. I talk to people and I hear around, challenges around financial sustainability, challenges around enrollment numbers, student numbers being down, the challenges of maintaining and attracting the best quality faculty, the best quality research, and institutions running at financial deficits, at losses. And it's unprecedented in the UK. There's been talk of universities having to go into administration, and that's a really serious time for some, because that really then has a fundamental impact, depending on what your view on society is, around the opportunity to provide access to education for all. And if that's the financial landscape, then that's personally a real worry and real concern for me.
Well, given what you said earlier about the way student expectations are changing, I would also want to get into the concept of, the role of the educator. Do you have any reflections on how that might be changing as a result of the pandemic? You mentioned these financial constraints, different enrollment patterns, the way students have new expectations around learning. How do you think the instructor or the lecturer has evolved?
Oh, in today's world, Alex, that's a great question. I mean, the one thing I see, and I have a huge degree of empathy, sympathy, but awe for our faculty and our researchers, that the role in the classroom now is a mini production. I was sharing this with Kevin before. Long gone are the days where it was stand up in front of a class of 80 and do your teaching. It's now face to face. It's now hybrid. It's online. You've got live chat. You've got surveys. You've got polls. You've got moderation. You've got to be equitable. You've got to be inclusive. You've got to manage your audience. And the member of faculty has to juggle that before they even think about teaching and the slides and the content. I say it's become a mini production. And what we've seen, I shared with Kevin a couple of years ago, we've seen the emergence of new roles come out of that. Digital classroom teaching assistants.
Mm-hmm.
Where was that role 2 years ago? And now it's a fundamental part of supporting the student experience and the learning experience in the classroom and online. And you spoke, Alex, around what does that mean? We as providers of education, as educators, we've got to look at everything now through several lenses. We've got to look at it through the social impact in terms of, are we being inclusive? Are we being equitable? Are we being diverse? We've got to look at it through the technological lens around, how are we providing the best learning technologies and platforms to support our student experience? And my role is to make sure that technology facilitates and enables that and doesn't get in the way of it. We've got to look at it through the economic lens around, are the courses affordable? Is there a return on investment? Are we making sure that we are being inclusive in terms of the financial price points? And then we've got to look at it around through an environmental lens. Increasingly, our students are aware of climate change. They're increasingly aware of sustainability, and that has to be reflected in the way that we provide our teaching, the content of our courses, and the way that we deliver them. And then the final thing is political. In this ever-increasing digital online world, there's a view that it's becoming more common to see government and political influences on that. So how, as an educator, do we remain impartial, independent, and provide the platforms for inclusive debate? Because that's what we're about. We're about creating networks and communities and resilient communities that support networking and discussion and debate. That's where we get the best learning from.
So let's talk about business models. You brought that up a little bit ago, Mark, and that some schools are struggling out there. So let's talk about how the competitive landscape might have changed and what that's going to mean for business models going forward.
I mean, we're very fortunate, specifically being the University of Oxford and being part of the University of Oxford. We are, by the Financial Times, ranked the #1 university in the world. We take a great deal of pride with that, but we're not complacent about that, because, as you quite rightly say, Kevin, it's an increasingly competitive landscape. There are new and emerging entrants to the market, particularly in relation to online. There are new partnerships and acquisitions that are occurring all the time. It's becoming a congested space when you look at the courses and programs that institutions are looking to provide now, whether it be AI, whether it be VR, AR, machine learning, sustainability, cybersecurity. Everybody is trying to grab a piece of that pie. And it's important that we are on that playing field, but that we are able to provide a differentiated offer that compel people to want to undertake their learning at Saïd Business School or the University of Oxford. Where those business models have changed, and we just touched on it a little bit previously, we have to be smarter in terms of almost what you might call those go-to-market strategies. On one hand, a very important part of our business model is and will continue to be the on-campus student. We've seen through COVID, perhaps not reflected in other institutions, our enrollment and application numbers are very healthy. On the first program cohorts, when we returned on campus post-COVID, our attendance rate was 100%. You always factor that there will be a degree of dropout, and yet for the business school, 100% of our MBA students turned up.
Oh, wow.
Which presented as a slightly different challenge because, a bit like the old cliche story of the airline seats, we had provision and planned for a degree of dropout, and it just didn't happen. So that is and will always continue to be an important part. Where our business models are changing, though, is online. And as I say, we recognize that at a time where we can't physically fit any more students on campus, partly because of our buildings, partly because of our collegiate college system and how places are restricted, we have to look at online as the only way to grow, whether that be through executive education or open programs. And in doing that, we have a social responsibility, as we were saying previously, about affordability. We have to take into account the current cost of living crisis, the current economic conditions, and make sure the price points for these are differentiated by geography, where we can have geo pricing, that they are affordable, and that we're sympathetic to the demands of our learners and our audiences. And that also helps support our corporate social responsibility. I'll try not to be defensive about this. I think the University of Oxford gets sometimes a poor reputation for how it is perceived as being predominantly a white middle class institution. And that couldn't be further from the truth. But I don't think that we promote that as much as we could. So, for example, our MBA class is constituted of students from 67 different countries. It's 97% international, with a 50% male-female gender split. I would argue it's probably one of the most diverse MBAs you can find in the world, but we don't make enough of it, and perhaps we should do. And that, as I say, reflects into the online model where we can, through our outreach policies, we hope we can make Oxford and Saïd Business School much more geographically accessible to learners in different countries than ever before. And that's one of the wonderful things about being involved in technology and how we can support and facilitate that.
Well, I think that's such an important point that you're making, which is that digital and online education can make the opportunities more plentiful, right? More widespread, rather than creating scarcity around a high quality education. You're actually working to make it more accessible to more people. I think that's fantastic. And, I wanted to ask Mark, that campus experience, it's obviously evolving. You're speaking to a more diverse, more geographically distributed student body. That is something that's new, but I'm curious, as a futurist, what are those things about the past that tend to persist in the campus experience? Even though there are a lot of changes, are there some things that you find really attract students or parents, to the university, in terms of its brand, something enduring from the past that you think kind of lingers?
It's a great question, Alex. And obviously, I think we are in a relatively unique position in terms of our brand strength and our brand association. And that will always be there. I mean, we're very fortunate that has existed for over 800 years now, and I'm sure will continue to exist long after I've gone. So we are very fortunate. We are very fortunate in terms of history and that hotbed and that seat of learning that we have. I think some of the other things that persist, though, are having that age, that brand, and that history only goes so far. And we can't rely on that. Increasingly, as we say, it's a competitive landscape. Students are looking for institutions that are forward thinking. They're making decisions based on, are they going to be applicable, transferable skills? Am I going to leave this institution a better person than when I came into it? And they're real questions that we have to answer, and then we have to demonstrate that. And as part of that, just one small example, our students are looking to ensure that our courses and our course content is relevant for today and tomorrow and next year and the year after. And they're looking to see that we are investing in new technology and new technologies, because that's what they're going to be facing and that's what they're going to be using in the workplace. So it's a sort of very complex ecosystem that we have to sort of temper the dial on all of those points to make sure we're getting that balance right.
Yeah, that's some great background there. The World Economic Forum has recently estimated that up to 65% of the jobs that the kids of this generation will need to prepare for don't yet exist. So you're speaking exactly to that statistic, this idea that we need to be forward thinking in how we prepare students, because we're not really sure what we're preparing them for, but we know that they need to have the tools to be successful, and that it won't be like yesterday.
Absolutely. And as you say, one of the biggest challenges that we have and that we all face in that is that the pace of technological change. I was going to say over the past 5 years, over the past year, is so incredible. Where was ChatGPT 12 months ago? It wasn't. So being able to predict what's happening in the next 12 months is virtually impossible. I don't know. My crystal ball doesn't tell me.
Right.
And I think that's where there's a changing mind shift in this, and it's a personal opinion. 3 and 5 year strategies are old hat now. You become hostage to them, and the world is changing so quickly. The skill is in having almost like a revolving 12-month strategy, that you've got organizational flexibility and agility to change and pivot and move to. Because one of the struggles I have is I can't stand up in front of my executive board and hand on heart with any degree of confidence tell them what the technology roadmap and landscape in 12 months' time is going to look like, because you just don't know.
Oh man, Mark, I found online a cheat sheet for ChatGPT, and it just has it was listing, it must have been 30 different categories of things that you should know to help you just use ChatGPT. And I was reading through all of them. I'm like, wow, each one of these are like opening up a whole area I need to learn. And I was like, ah.
I was going to say, Kevin, I mean, it's a great point, because going back to almost where we started, the toolkit of a CIO is so much more different now post-pandemic to what it was pre-pandemic. I look at my role. I'm a futurist. I'm a technologist. I'm a strategist. I'm a coach. I'm a mentor. I'm a counselor. I'm a peacekeeper. I'm a negotiator. I'm an influencer. I'm a communicator.
Yes. Oh my.
The skills around that are immense, and they're not just unique to the CIO. We were talking previously about how the role of the lecturer and the faculty has changed. These are fast changing times, and we have to be able to adapt and flex with them. And the skill in that is being agile, is being adaptable, and it's about embracing change. Because I think we said the last time we met, Kevin, those institutions that don't adapt and embrace change are going to be the ones that aren't here in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months time.
Wow. And all those different roles you're describing all have their own skill requirements of their own to be able to use those skills and to flourish in that environment. But one of those roles is almost in combat. You have to protect your institution, and the threat surface for universities continues to expand as more and more of the programs are online and digital. I mean, how have you seen the cybersecurity space evolve over the last 3 years?
It's been immense, Kevin, and I would be personally surprised if cybersecurity isn't on the top 10 risk agendas of every executive board in every organization. And if it isn't, it should be. That's my personal view. And the cyber terrorism has become, as you'll be aware, increasingly sophisticated, increasingly clever, whether it be malware, whether it be virus, whether it be phishing, whether it be whaling, whether it be spearing, whether it be impersonation. You know, it's incredibly sophisticated, and the challenge of myself and any organization is, how do you stay one step ahead of that? And it's part through technology, through security by design. It's part through education and awareness. You know, our defenses are only as strong as the weakest member of our staff or faculty and students. We can invest in the best technology in the world. It just takes that clicking on that one link or downloading that one file that you shouldn't have done, and it's all sort of undermined. The one thing with higher education and cybersecurity is, how do you proportionately balance what is intrinsically an open access information sharing culture with proportionate measures that protect the organization and, more importantly, the individual and their data. You know, we are seeing in the UK reports that higher education, after the NHS, the National Health Service, is the second most common attack vector, for exactly those reasons that we've set out, because we are known to be open access institutions that are typically bogged down with legacy infrastructure, complex legacy infrastructure that is hard to upgrade and hard to change. And we've seen a number of highly prominent cyber attacks in UK universities, which we all sympathise and empathise and wouldn't want to be there, but tangibly illustrate the risk, the very real risk that exists and that it happens. So some of the things that we try to do to mitigate that, and they're not the answer in itself, Kevin, but at Saïd Business School, we take Cyber Essentials Plus certification really seriously. We take ISO 27001 certification really seriously. We do adopt a security by design approach to all of our new technologies and all of our platforms. And we make sure that for anything that's coming into our portfolio, we do thorough due diligence on it before it comes anywhere near to our tech stack. And as I say, this isn't about me being obstructive or difficult. It's about me protecting Saïd Business School. It's about me protecting our staff, our faculty and our researchers and our students and all of their data, whether it be the intellectual property of research or whether it be the personal data of themselves and their employee records.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. So let's get back to the topic of generative AI. Now, I want to know personally your experience when you first, jumped in there and started playing with it. Tell me how you felt and what your impressions were.
I think there's two sides to that, isn't there, Kevin? There's a professional and there's a personal view.
Yep.
There was a personal view thinking, what a great resource this is. How much time is this going to save me? and then there was a professional view around, oh my God, how am I going to moderate and facilitate this in the workplace? And what are the controls and the frameworks and the procedures that are going to allow us to experiment and innovate in a secure way? And what are the use case scenarios around how and where this is going to be used? And then I stepped back and I thought, Mark, you're one person as the CIO of Saïd Business School. You are not going to set the policy and frameworks for this for the world. There are other people who are much better placed than you to do that. So I'm quite happy to take someone else's lead on this, and we'll follow. But I think it really is a case of, like any new technology, this is the current trend, but I think the same applies to any new technology. We should explore it. We should explore it with our eyes open. We should look for tangible use cases as to what is the benefit of this and how is it going to be applied. And then we should experiment and trial. And if it succeeds, we scale it out. And if it doesn't succeed, we put it in the bin and move on.
Got it. So I am finding myself probably logging into one of the generative AI platforms 20 times a day. What number would you give yourself, Mark?
I probably dabble at the weekends, Kevin, as a keen amateur enthusiast, and that's really just because of the pressures of the day job and the amount of activity that we've got going on. But I think it's one of those things that I'm conscious we need to try and carve out. Easier said than done. Carve out and dedicate more time that we can properly research this. because I was reading this week, we need to embrace it, as I say, and to stick my head in the sand or my team's head in the sand is not the right response, because we need to embrace it because it's going to happen. And I think creating strong partnerships with our faculty and our students to understand how these technologies are going to be used and how they can benefit is the way to go. And it's a collaborative partnership. And, we experiment and we progress together. But I say at the moment, I think purely because of some of the other fantastically exciting strategic initiatives we've got going on, time pressures mean I struggle. I struggle to find the play time that I should have.
Understood, Mark. Well, for those of you watching, the music that led off this program was done by generative AI. So, we're having AI music playing for you. Also, my last two presentations are mostly designed in DALL-E and Bing, where the imagery that I use in my PowerPoints are now coming from that. And of course, a lot of research, a lot of sourcing of content and everything else that we use on a day-to-day basis. We're finding it through the generative AI platforms, all kinds of stuff there. So yeah, it's none of us have time. I understand that, Mark, absolutely. But it'll be so interesting as more and more of the generative AI solutions come into our existing software applications. So I know Microsoft is getting ready to release it inside of 365 and all that. So you have your Copilot. If you're a developer, of course, you're probably using it every day, all day. And just it's going to be a part of so much out there.
I think you're absolutely right, Kevin. Already, I can see numbers of tangible, beneficial applications for generative AI, whether it's speed of course development and content creation, which could historically take weeks and months, could be done in hours and days.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be, the assistive customer student experience, around careers advice, course selection, application enrollment, all of these things are fantastic opportunities where generative AI and AI tools can be positively applied. And I think my role, as we said, is to make sure that we are embracing and we're exploring these opportunities, because there are definitely benefits for good in this when applied and used properly.
Well, when it comes to higher education, one of the more visible aspects of generative AI that captures the headlines, it's the element of students using it to, let's say, supplement their work. And I think that, it's inevitable, right, that students use these kinds of tools to get stuff done. But I was just curious, in your role or in your experience, Mark, how are professors and lecturers handling this? I mean, are they really big on detecting it and eliminating it, or are they supporting it? You got any sense from your university?
I think we're open at the moment, Alex. We're finding our feet, and I think it's I was going to say a game. I think it's a bit of a cat and mouse, isn't it? Because at the same time that we know these technologies exist and are being used, so are many of the established plagiarism tools, such as Turnitin, are trying to enhance their own AI to increase the AI detection of the use of AI, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm,
So it's an interesting dilemma, and a purely personal view. This isn't a University of Oxford view, but if these are the methods in which today's learners are going to research, is there any difference to that as long as you reference it in your assignment, your assessment, your article, as them reading a book or a publication or a white paper? Surely the importance is referencing where your material is from. Does that make it any more or less valid? Rhetorical question.
Right. Well, and kind of along the lines of what Kevin was saying, we're using it in the workplace. So why would we deny students the ability to use it in their studies if, once they start working, chances are they will find benefits of it to use. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And, did we have a similar view when Google search was launched?
Exactly.
No, I don't recall so.
Mm-hmm. in fact, there were classes and tutorials and, you were really encouraged to learn how to use search. It was seen as the next big thing. So it's interesting to see with the chat GPT and whatnot, there's a bit of resistance, kind of seeing it as cheating or something. And, I don't know if that negative perspective, it's not constructive. I don't know.
No, no. I think it's about using the resources that are available to you in the best way. I think, as we open the show, Alex, we shared that learning is an incredibly personal experience. It's down to the individual. People learn in different ways. It's about finding the way that is best for you. And if that means using ChatGPT, great for you. If that means going to the library and putting your nose in a book, great for you. If it means downloading a podcast to your iPhone, great for you. You find the way that works for you. I mean, just as a personal story, if I may, very briefly, my son's just finished his GCSEs in the UK. He really struggled with revision. Writing copious amounts of notes didn't work. Writing cue cards didn't work. Using online apps didn't work. But typing into ChatGPT as one example for his history exam, give me 5 bullet points on the pros and cons of the Treaty of Versailles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That really worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
So as I say, it's about finding what's the best method for you and using the resources that are available. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I was just thinking, as society sort of evolves along the lines of accepting different ways of learning. I mean, this concept of neurodiversity is relatively new, in the way that we understand each other and understand how people learn and how they communicate and how they work. So, I mean, these kind of can work together, right? We can embrace generative AI so that we can embrace other ways of learning and enhance all of our potential rather than just selecting for certain types of what you might call intelligence or learning.
I think that's a wonderful point, Alex, because I think, as you say, it's how you use ChatGPT and generative AI to augment and complement what you have rather than substitute and replace. It's the part that it plays in that decision making, in that discussive part, in the networking, to ensure that you're coming up with the optimum answer. And I think if you use it in that scenario, in that place, it's a fantastic resource. I do get slightly nervous where it's a research output where you go, there's the answer, I take it, and it just gets passed on verbatim. Mm-hmm. That's what I slightly worry about, because there is a question around the authenticity of that and the accuracy of that as we're seeing. But as a research tool to inform better decision making, absolutely.
So, Mark, you had said earlier one of those roles that you have is kind of chief strategy guy and futurist even. Now, your school has a renowned school that teaches foresight. Do you plug into that and utilize the skills and talent you have right there in your own organization?
That is a phenomenal question, Kevin, and very relevant for us at the moment. I think there is a lot more we can do around or practice what we preach. We are blessed to have some of the best, most eminent professors in the world who lecture on AI, who lecture on sustainability, who lecture on cybersecurity, who lecture on sustainable finance, etc., etc., etc. Lecture on organizational change. I think there is definitely a current conversation around, are we tapping in to that knowledge and skill as much as we can when we look at our own organizational strategies and our own organizational change. So not only teaching it, but applying it ourselves. So I think that's a very current question where we're self-reflecting at the moment, Kevin, around, are we leveraging that expertise that exists under our roof as much as we could be? And the honest answer at the moment is probably not.
Mark, we want to thank you so much for joining us today here on the Future of Business TV. Thank you so much, and we appreciate it and enjoy your conference.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Alex. It's been wonderful talking with you today.